Hi, I'm Dan Sweet. I'm Director of Public Relations and Communications for Helicopter Association International, and we're glad that you're able to take time out of your busy schedule today to join us for a really interesting topic. For those of you who are pilots who have been around aviation for quite some time, you understand the difference between visual flight rules, instrument flight rules, and now let's start talking about digital flight rules as such. I was having a brief discussion with our panelists today and realized that we've probably mistitled it just a little bit. We don't want to imply that his organization is doing any rule making. So maybe digital flight operations is still a better terminology, but I think it's going to be a very intriguing topic and we hope you enjoy it today. So let's go ahead and get right into things. I'm going to introduce our panelists today. Terry McVinus is the president and CEO of RTCA. RTCA was previously known as the Radio Technical Commission for Aeronautics, a private non-for-profit organization founded in 1935. 1935 wasn't too long after the first commercial radio broadcast here in the US in 1920. And of course, the Wright brothers did their flight in December of 1903. So it kind of shows how quickly aeronautical radio communications became important and needed international standards. Today, RTCA supports emerging trends in aerospace through the development of performance-based standards that serve as the basis for certification by the FAA, EASA, and other regulators around the world. Prior to coming to RTCA, McVinus spent 10 years with the Boeing Company, where he led Boeing's relationships with ICAO, the FAA Flight Standards Service Organization, pilots associations, and other industry groups. He is a 30-year airline pilot veteran, and he has rated on multiple aircraft and has more than 17,000 hours of flight time. McVinus currently chairs the FAA Research, Engineering, Development Advisory Subcommittee on Aircraft Safety and is an advisory board member of the Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University Center for Aviation and Aerospace Safety. He holds an MBA from Seattle University, a BS degree in aerospace engineering from the University of Colorado, and a certificate of aviation safety management at the University of Southern California. If you are new to our webinars, we do make these interactive. We want to make sure that you have a chance to ask questions. We will ask you to go ahead and submit questions during the webinar, and we'll get to them after he finishes his presentation. To do that, on most computers, the question module will be on the side or the bottom of your screen, maybe one of the hamburger menus drop down, wherever you can ask the question. Feel free to use the chat function, but we're going to really pay most of our attention to the question module for that period of it. This webinar is being recorded. We do ask that you share it if you think it's important that other people see it. We'll be making the link available to all the attendees probably tomorrow afternoon. We will have that on the HAI website, rotor.org/webinars. We'll have it on our YouTube channel as well. We usually try to get them out as fast as we can. Usually it's about 24 hours, but sometimes it takes us a little bit longer. So with that, I invite Terry to start your presentation. Welcome to HAI Rotor at Work.
Well, thanks, Dan. Appreciate the invitation. Appreciate the invitation from HAI to be here today. Your organization, your president, James Viola, have been big supporters of ours over the years and involved with a lot of our different committees, and we certainly appreciate that support. I'm going to just start sharing my screen, make sure I get it up there correctly. As Dan said, we're really looking at this from an operational standpoint as opposed to a rulemaking standpoint, because we're not in the business of making rules. That's the FAA's role. But we are trying to work with industry and bring industry together to look at some of the concepts behind digital flight operations, what those are going to mean, what it's going to take to actually support such a concept, and then our goal at the end is to really put together a white paper that outlines all this for the benefit of the industry and the regulator. Just as a little bit of background about RTC, I think Dan, you probably did it very well already. But as Dan mentioned, we've been around since 1935. The very first standard that we developed was in 1939 that was a standard for anti-static antennas on airplanes to keep the static from building up and interfering with the transmission of radio. So that was the very first one we did in 1939. And we've been around since then, creating standards for the industry, really trying to get to find some common ground with both industry and government for higher levels of performance in global aviation. So we create these diverse collaborative partnerships. We bring together the subject matter experts that are very knowledgeable and experienced and respected from both the business aspect, the technical aspect, and operational and regulatory, and develop these performance-based consensus solutions that really serve all of the airspace users and some of the related stakeholders, of course. We certainly have a very long history, as I mentioned, in serving traditional aviation users. But as we start looking towards the future of the transportation ecosystem, we've really started to broaden our scope quite a bit to include some of the new entrants, as well as some of the advanced and new emerging technologies. It's really going to require let's say, a fresh look at standards development and what the needs of our members are really going to be. And of course, our real role here is ensuring the safety of the national airspace system. And I can't overstate that enough, because when we develop our standards, we want to make sure that they are protecting the crews, the cargo, and certainly the safety of the traveling public that utilize our great system that we have. As Dan mentioned, all of our standards are really serve as a means of compliance with FAA, EASA, and some of the other regulators around the world. We have many of our standards are referenced by ICAO in their standards and recommended practices, or SARPs. Standards are referenced by the FAA and in TSOs and advisory circulars, and they provide that at least a partial basis for the certification of equipment. And then the private sector utilizes our standards as well for the development and the investment that they make and some of the business decision making that they have to do as they develop new processes. And before I get really into the aspects of digital flight operations, I do want to just make a comment about the role of new technologies. It's not just for some of the new entrants. It's not just for new applications. These new technologies that are being developed today really are providing safety benefits for all aircraft operations. And as someone that comes from more of the legacy side of aviation, that's one of the things that gets me so excited about some of the things that we're talking about when we start thinking about these new technologies, how they're going to deploy not only in the advanced air mobility side of the house, but also what their applications can be in the legacy operations. Technology over the years has done some tremendous thing in improving aviation safety for the last 50, 60 years. And some of these new technologies are going to raise that safety bar even higher. I think they have the potential to end some of our common accident causes that we still see today. When we talk about loss of control, control flight into terrain or CFIT, fuel mismanagement issues, and so on. So I'm really excited about this, again, across the entire ecosystem of aviation that are going to benefit from some of these new technologies. And I also think that it's going to be really important that some of these new technologies are going to provide some benefits to our existing infrastructure. While we talk sometimes about the need for new infrastructure, some of these new technologies, especially when we start talking about digital flight operations, they really have the potential to utilize and help us utilize some of the existing infrastructure that we have in place already and operate them a little bit more efficiently and securely as well. And then I also believe that these new technologies are going to really bring some security and economic benefits. They're going to make our system even more secure than it is today. And certainly provide economic benefits in terms of new jobs and in terms of growth in our industry, that's really going to be something that we can look back on that has been a big benefit to the new technologies being developed in aviation today. So digital flight operations, as we think about what's been going on in recent years, there's been, of course, this big focus on the capabilities of the different vehicles that are being developed. But there's not as much talk about of how we're going to get them all integrated into the NAS. And that really is going to be the tough part of getting that scalability into the airspace system with some of all of the new entrants and the new types of operations that are coming into our space. And whether you're a legacy operator or part of the AAM community, we all have a common need, and that's access to the airspace. We've got to figure out how we can do that better and more efficiently. And as our airspace continues to get more commoditized, again, increasing the number of users that are going to be wanting to access to that system, we really think that there's got to be some things that will help with that scalability, providing perhaps some different types of operations or rules to access that airspace. It's going to be so necessary in the future, and go beyond what we have today with cloud clearance and visibility requirements that are where they are today, but look at them more towards what are the capabilities of the aircraft itself. And so I think this is where digital flight really has some great potential. Now, the whole concept of digital flight is not a new one. NASA's been working on this for the better part of 10 years. It's gone under a couple of different names. And just to give you a flavor for some of the things that have been going on in recent years, there were two FAA aviation rulemaking advisory rulemaking committees, or ARCs. 2019, the UAS and controlled airspace ARC identified a research gap that said there needed to be a new set of flight rules. Last year, in the Beyond Visual Line of Sight ARC, again, there were some recommendations in that report for what they called autonomous flight rules. Industry as well has been very active in this space. In 2019, Boeing and Airbus came together and collaboratively, and they wrote a report warning that some of the air traffic technology that we have today is going to have to be significantly modernized in order to really manage some of the new small aircraft that are going to be occupying that future airspace. And the two companies presented a common vision up at ICAO in 2020, talking about a digitally based air traffic management system that covered airspace requirements from the ground up to near Earth orbits. And they really described how rapidly increasing numbers of drones and possible future smaller taxis and so on are going to really require a new air traffic control system. WISC last year wrote their UAM ConOps, and they talked about transitioning to a future where automated and uncrewed aircraft can safely carry passengers and cargo in urban and suburban areas. They laid out a concept of operations. They talked about some of the new technology, some of the regulatory and social recommendations that were going to be needed to deploy UAM in the United States and fully integrated into the National Airspace System. And of course, I mentioned NASA. They've got several reports out there on digital flight operations or digital flight rules and the need to enable this new era of aerial mobility that's going to be required in the future. And even at RTCA, we published DO304 Alpha, and it was a document that really addressed all unmanned aircraft systems and UAS operations that are being considered for a realistic implementation in the NAS. And it really was intended to educate the community and be used as a means to facilitate future discussion on some UAS standards. So a lot of work's been going on in this concept of digital flight. I say it's not a new concept, but we're trying to really get it moving forward now into the future. So what's the need here? when you talk about advanced air mobility, it really, I kind of view it as a bigger umbrella term that really encompasses a lot of different use cases and a lot of new technologies and capabilities. And if we try to look at them purely as individual use cases that require separate rulemaking activities for each of those cases, it's going to take decades to really get anything meaningful accomplished and integrated into our airspace. So what we really need today is this longer term vision that the industry can really coalesce around, so that we don't have conflicts between individual applications. So if we come up with a common set of principles and ideas that would ultimately lead to the right regulatory environment for this to happen, it'll actually, I believe, will help bring some of these new technologies, these new capabilities into the NAS in a much quicker and a much more efficient way. And the whole need for digital flight operation is really looking at that gap between IFR and VFR. And under VFR operations, it provides lots of operational freedom, but it's very limited when it comes to low visibility types of operations. With IFR, you got that access to the airspace under low visibility conditions, but there's a lot of operational freedoms that you give up to get there. And both of those really rely on some human decision-making to cover everything that maybe isn't covered in the rules themselves. So if we start thinking about digital flight operations and any sort of regulatory environment that would be required, it really can form a framework as a means to not just accommodate some of these new ideas, but to actually integrate them together. And so as these different ideas come forward and these different concepts of operations come forward, it's really going to be important to look at how digital flight ops can maybe enhance or be a part of what they're trying to do with these different types of operations. So what are some of the benefits from digital flight ops? Again, it's really based upon aircraft capability. Operating with more of the freedoms of VFR without having maybe that natural human vision on board. I mentioned earlier the importance of scalability, being able to increase the number of operations and the missions that can be conducted by both uncrewed systems as in the AAM community, but I think also, I would say, even in the legacy operations, because the legacy part is going to be growing very rapidly as well as we look towards the future. And what we're really doing with digital flight is enabling technologies and capabilities together. So we talk about some of the things that have gone on here. I've got some bullet points there of some of these new technologies, higher quality navigation systems, whether it's GPS, INS, and so on. Better databases for flight management through digital NAS information, digital autopilots that have much higher accuracy and integrity, intent sharing, that vehicle to vehicle communication that can go on between different vehicles in the airspace that are operating. And then through that, perhaps create some cooperative sort of operating practices where the rules really take into account some of these new technologies. So whether I'm company A developing a vehicle or company, and there's company B and developing a vehicle, a common set of rules so that they're built so they understand what each one is doing. So that again, that cooperative operating practices. And then the use of third-party service providers that can provide some maybe safety critical sort of services that are independent of the operator itself, but again, a set of standards that everybody is working towards so that the developers of the vehicles, if you will, can focus on their capabilities in a standardized way that communicates with the other vehicles as well as those third-party service providers. So it creates a really different kind of ecosystem when it comes to the operations that are taking place. So what's the significance of all this? Well, safety. Number one is safety. How are we improving the safety of the NAS? Utilizing some of these new technologies, again, not just with the AAM community, but across all operations. Using some of that new technologies that'll help with security and efficiency. And Digital Flight Ops has a capability to address all three of these areas. And it's really bringing a technology convergence of some of the classical communications, navigations, and surveillance sort of technology with some of the new advanced technology that's out there, whether we're talking automation, the connectivity, information to information access, and then some of the supporting services that go along with that, whether it's UTM, looking at those operations below 400 feet, ETM operations above 60,000 feet, or whether the things in between with the XTM concepts, if you will. And then again, converging some of the legacy operations with some of these new use cases. So we talk about technology advanced aircraft with simplified vehicle operations, helicopter and heliport, current infrastructure that we have today versus some of the new infrastructure that's going on with eVTOL and vertiports with the UAM community. And how can we utilize some of those things together and a lot more efficiently? Looking at those low altitude operations with small UAS and beyond visual line of sight. And then the whole aspect of personal aviation and regional air mobility, as they call it, I think it's really going to fundamentally change how we travel and receive our goods. Here in the United States, I think we have over 5,000 airports, yet only 30 of them accommodate about 70% of the traveling public. 30 airports, 70%. So there's a tremendous amount of infrastructure out there that's not being accessed. And so having the ability to bring some of these abilities to transport people and goods in a much more efficient way, utilizing current infrastructure we have available, is really going to help the entire regions in bringing forth some of those opportunities with some of the new technologies that are out there. So what we're doing at our TCA is really a call to action. We've stood up a forum for digital flight operations. We're bringing the industry together to start, bring some of those subject matter experts from the various companies that are involved in this space, whether it's Reliable Robotics, Wisk, just to name two, Archer, and sit down and figure out, what does digital flight look? What are some of the key concepts that, no matter what the company is working on it, are there some key concepts that they can all get together on and identify that would be very helpful to start building the future, building that integrated model for operations, given some of these new technologies. We're going to be putting out a white paper this year. We're on a very fast track to get this done, but we think this is going to be really important. As I said, we've been talking about digital flight ops now for over 10 years. If we don't start doing something today, 10 years from now, we're going to still be having these same conversations. So the time to move is now. And certainly at our TCA, we're trying to help bring the industry together and move this forward. From an industry endorsement standpoint, it really is going to take the industry to endorse some of these concepts to both NASA and to FAA, bring their use cases to the regulator and to NASA, so that they can be made in the context of a digital flight operations ideal. And then again, bringing the whole AAM community together with that common goal of making DFO a reality. Also very important to provide that stakeholder feedback to FAA and NASA. And then the reverse is true as well, making sure the industry gets briefed on the progress that's being made by NASA, by FAA, by the research and development community, and the industry proponents, again, to be working very, very closely together. So a lot of things to do here. I think it's an extremely exciting time in aviation, one of the most exciting times, I think, since the dawning of the jet age. it's moving very rapidly. And so we need to be getting everybody together, working on the same page, if you will, government and industry working together to make all of this a reality and get some of these wonderful concepts that are going to enhance safety and enhance security, enhance our economy, make them a reality for the entire traveling public. So with that, I will take some questions if you have any.
We do have a couple questions that came in, Terry. Thank you so much for the presentation. I'm going to start with one that I have. I drive an older vehicle. I know that eventually we're going to be getting to autonomous vehicles on the highway more so than we have now. You touched on it a little bit, but as somebody who may operate an older aircraft, a legacy aircraft, an analog aircraft, if you will, are they going to be expected to retrofit their aircraft with newer technology to be able to operate in the same airspace with the new AAM aircraft, or is this something that the AAM aircraft will be able to work with around them, in your opinion?
I think it depends on who you ask, and what the right answer is there. What it's going to take is to ensure that all the different aspects of our industry are working together. So like for our digital flight ops paper that we're working, we want to make sure that we're bringing not only the folks that are building the vehicles into the room, but we're also bringing people in that are going to be being part of the operation. So whether it's the Airline Pilots Association, NATCA, the Controllers Association, folks that are going to be impacted by this, getting their voice to the table is going to be very, very important. And then we can work out some of these issues. Is it a retrofit thing or not? And I think if we do it right, it doesn't necessarily have to be a retrofit thing. Again, if you're basing your ability to access the airspace on the capabilities of the aircraft, some of that will take care of itself. I don't think we're looking at, it's not digital flight ops exclusive of IFR and VFR. It's in conjunction with those two. I think we have to be thinking of it that way.
Okay, well, that brings up a second question, a follow-up question. You look for the collaboration with the operators, with the manufacturers. What about with regulators? How is the international community working on international standards? Are they working on international standards, or is this every country for themselves?
That's a great question, and it goes really beyond digital flight ops. From a standards development standpoint, one of our key things that are very important to us is that we develop internationally harmonized standards. So we have a organization over in Europe called EUROCAE that we do probably 90% of our standards work with them. And so when we develop a standard, they're technically equivalent, and it allows for both FAA and EASA to essentially use the same basis for certification from those. So that international harmonization is very important, certainly between Europe and the US. When it comes to the rest of the world, a lot of countries follow in line behind either FAA or EASA, and so they adopt some of those same rules. So if we start off with them harmonized between US and Europe, it's a great start. But the other part that we really need to be looking at too is the role of ICAO and the work that we do with the standards work up there, because obviously that's where you get access now to 193 different member states. And so we're working very closely with ICAO with our standards work. In the AAM field, they're setting up a new study group. I think it's starting in May, that we're going to be a part of, along with the other standards development organizations. So again, we're all kind of working together, and then through ICAO is really an opportunity to work on that harmonization even further.
We have a question from Mark Huber of AIN, Aviation International News, asking about a topic that I know that your organization has been working on, that's been in the news as well. What's the best way the aviation community can work with the FAA and FCC to ensure that the difficulties with the 5G C-band are not replicated with relation to UAM operations, particularly autonomous ones?
Another great question, and appreciate that, because it's something we at RTC have been involved with for almost 3 years now. A lot of lessons learned. And one of the biggest lessons is that we cannot think of aviation operating in isolation. The definition of aviation is changing. It's beyond thinking about getting to airport to airport sort of operations. And we're going to be thinking about door to door operations from the time you walk out of your home to the time you get to your destination, vacation home, or wherever you're going. And to do that, it's going to require things that go beyond just a traditional aviation. So, and of course, one of the first things that we think about with that is it's going to take the allocations of new spectrum, frequency spectrum, to help get some of these different systems integrating and talking to each other. So if we're going to do that successfully, and so that we avoid what we went through with the 5G implementation, is we've got to get our industries working together closely today, right away, right from the beginning. Do the work as part of the development phase, if you will, and not wait till the implementation phase. We waited too long with the implementation phase under 5G C-band, and then everybody already moved out in their direction. And then we had, now we're in the process of trying to, get the genie back in the bottle and try to figure out how we can collectively, go forward. But that's it. That's a long answer to the basic aspect of we've got to get our industries working together from the day one. And I think that'll go a long ways. And part of that involves really understanding each other's industries. We don't understand telecom, they don't understand aviation, and they talk a different language than we do. And the more that we can collaborate together and work together and get to understand, what the role safety plays in what we do, and how the things that we do to ensure safety, which is different maybe than the telecoms. But once they understand that a little bit more, once we understand them a little bit more, I think we can avoid what we just went through in the last year or so.
Technology is moving faster and faster and faster and faster. Is the speed with which technology changes, is it hurting or is it helping the adoption of these standards or the creation of the standards, I guess?
It's certainly a challenge because standards development traditionally is a kind of a long process. And certainly when you think about standards development from the time you start developing the standards to the time you actually have a basis of certification and rulemaking by the FAA, and then you have actually get something to the marketplace, can sometimes take 10, 12 years or even longer in some cases. So we've got to, with new technology and as fast as it's going, that's just not going to work. So we've got to find a balance there. We've got to, again, I think earlier engagement with the industry is going to be important. We as a standards development organization have to figure out ways that we can more efficiently get that standards work done. I think there's a role for the regulator to kind of do the same thing. How can they work a little bit closer with the standards development organizations and in order to get their TSOs developed and their rulemaking out. They work very closely with us now, don't get me wrong, but is there something, what role does the regulator play as well? We all have a role in this, and we have to be thinking about that and how we can do that more efficiently, very definitely.
I think David is asking here for a bit of a prediction from you. Could you be able to give an example of a possible new rule or standard that might be appropriate for some of the new vehicles or technology that would be different from the current VFR or IFR regulations, but still integrate in a system with existing aircraft and be subject for a standard as opposed to a regulation?
I hate to predict, and I would say right now it might be a little too early to even make a prediction, which is why we're doing this work with our group that we have and our forum on digital flight. don't fully know, I think, what we don't know. And so we need to get some of this stuff figured out. You know, the work NASA's done, for example, it's excellent work. It's a little more conceptual than it is reality, maybe. But at the same time, it's such a great basis for what industry can be looking at now. And so a little early to answer that question or make a prediction. I think we need to continue to gather the facts and data, if you will, to really understand what it's going to take, and then how we can work with the regulator to also make it a reality. Because we don't know even yet, is it going to require new rulemaking? Is it going to require just a modification of current rules? We don't know yet, and we need to figure all that out.
Do you think it will require the actual physical integration of a certified AAM aircraft with the existing aircraft in order to see if there's something that needs to be addressed, or will they try to get to that before that?
I think there will be there's going to be a lot of research and development in this area to fully understand it. So I don't know yet either. I said we're very early in this process. You know, I think 6 months from now or a year from now, I might be able to better answer that question. But again, working together very closely with the industry and working with the R&D folks, whether it's the R&D folks at FAA or industry themselves, this is really going to take a good, strong effort to bring some of these concepts together into something that we can actually make a reality going forward.
Okay, Terry, we don't have any other questions that are outstanding, so please allow me to thank you for your time today. We are grateful that you were able to break away from your schedule and join us this afternoon. We certainly appreciate it.
Well, thank you. Really appreciate the opportunity, Dan, and to all of HEI. Again, thank you for all of your support. We look forward to working with you on this particular topic as well as other future ones as well. So thank you.
Absolutely. It's certainly been my pleasure. Let me go ahead and share screen. We'll wrap up a few things here this afternoon. There we got all the buttons pushed. Save the date. We do have some upcoming webinars as well. Webinar in 2 weeks. We're going to be discussing the new HAI Legal Services Program. This program is going to be basically for any aspect of aviation law. One of the things we're looking at is try to create a legal directory that will be user created. People that have had legal issues and have had experience with aviation attorneys will be able to recommend them to be included in this services directory. We know that there are very few new legal problems out there. It seems like everybody's experienced something at least once. And so if we can find somebody who has experience in dealing with those issues and share that with our members, that's what our goal is. Some of you are familiar with Sarah McLeod. She has been on our webinars in the past. Stump the Lawyer. She'll be our special guest that afternoon, and she is looking forward to talking with us. March 9th would be our next regular webinar, which is actually right at the very end of HAI Heli Expo in Atlanta. Great time to visit the show. Great time to visit Atlanta if you have a chance. Jim Viola, our president and CEO, will be giving the State of the Industry address at Heli Expo. And what we're going to do is bring the recording of his press conference where he's talking about that to the webinar on the 16th, the following week. We're just going to bump it out a week because we just simply don't have the bandwidth during the show to be able to host a live webinar right now. We do ask that you provide feedback. We will be trying to get a questionnaire out to you this afternoon or tomorrow. If you can take a few minutes just to give us your thoughts on the webinar today, we'd appreciate it. If you have suggestions for future webinars, we appreciate those as well. HAI is a membership organization. We work for the industry. We work for our members. We'd like to know what you think we need to do. Either do better, drop entirely. If we're missing something, please let us know. The best way to do that is to send James Viola an email. His email address is president@rotor.org, and he does request any input or any thoughts, any comments that you want to make on today's topic or any other topic. He's always looking for your feedback. HAI also likes to help share the news of what's going on in our industry. We have a couple different ways to do that. Rotor Daily is one of our digital publications. We send this out every business day. We go through and sort all the vertical aviation news we can find, and we put it into one quick email that we'll send out. It's usually somewhere between 10 and 20 stories that are relevant to the industry each day, each business day. And it's free. All you have to do is send us your email. We'll send it to you each day. And so you can take a look at that at your convenience. It's called Story Links. HAI also produces Rotor Magazine. It's an award-winning publication that goes more in depth than what we can do in Rotor Daily. And so it's a great publication filled with information from subject matter experts. It's also free. The publication is either digital or print. If you want the print magazine and you're overseas, we do have a small fee for mailing that, but it's not significant. Best way to sign up for both those publications is to go to rotor.org/subscribe, and you'll get the information to us, and we'll start getting you on the list for those right away. That does wrap us up for the week. We appreciate that you took time out of your schedule to join us. Until 2 weeks from now, 2 weeks from now, we ask that you be safe, you fly safe, and we will see you again very, very soon.